Thanks for joining us here on 90s Plus. I'm Chris Bianchi. While the Denver Broncos might not have had a first or a second round draft pick coming into this year's NFL draft, but they did trade into the back end of the second round to take speedy wide receiver Marvin Mims from Oklahoma in this past weekend's NFL draft. They also took a linebacker, Drew Sanders, and a defensive back in the third round, a safety out of Boise State in the sixth round, and an offensive lineman in the seventh round as well. So joining us for a bit more on what the Broncos did is 90s Broncos insider Mike Klis. Mike, what did you make of the fact that the Broncos did actually end up trading back into the second round of those 5 picks overall?
Yeah, and there's actually a sixth player from the draft, and that was they traded for Adam Troutman, a
Okay.
veteran. They moved some picks around, some rounds. The one thing that struck me, first of all, this was a record number of trades, and what's happening is teams are not giving up. They're not trading rounds. They're not trading picks. They're flopping rounds. And that has caused a lot more trading activity, I do believe. For instance, the Broncos to go get Marvin Mims, they moved up 5 spots, but they didn't give up a 6th-round pick or a 5th-round pick. They gave up a 5th-round pick while getting a 6th-round back. So they basically gave up a round to go get Marvin Mims 5 picks away. And now it was a little different for Riley Moss. They did give up 2 flat-out picks, but they started from nothing to go into the third round to get Riley Moss at number 83. So, Marvin Mims, they were looking at tight ends in that, they started at 67 and 68. They were hoping one of 3 tight ends were there, or at least close enough to go get. And that was Sam Laporta, tight end from Iowa, Luke Musgrave, a tight end from Oregon State, and Luke Schumacher, a tight end from Michigan. All of those 3 left. Laporta went early, like number 34, and Musgrave went 42, and Schumacher went 58, just a little bit out of their range, the Broncos' range. And so when those 3 left, then they had Mims on the board. He was speed, and they needed speed on offense. Think Kansas City. Kansas City, 15 losses in a row. It looks like they've got more speed than the Broncos at every position, not just at receiver. So it was good they got him. He's a good go route guy. He needs to run the rest of the route tree. He didn't do too much of that at Oklahoma. So he's got up, and he's only 21. He just turned 21. And so he's got a ways to go to develop. I wouldn't expect much out of him this year as a rookie. Maybe he'll prove me wrong. Drew Sanders was a guy that a lot of people had in the first round. A lot of mocksters had Drew Sanders in the first round as the top inside linebacker. Jack Campbell from Iowa wound up being the top inside linebacker, and he went like 18. Drew Sanders fell to 67. And so, he's got all the physical tools, whether he's inside linebacker or outside linebacker. I think inside, he's got to work on his confidence. He's got to believe in himself more. And that might be one reason why he fell a little bit, but he's a heck of a physical specimen. And then Riley Moss, probably the most fascinating player in the draft because he's the Payton Hillis of cornerbacks. Could be the first white cornerback since Jason Sehorn, who retired in 93, 94. And so, everyone has him. I mean, I talked to other scouts on other teams, and they have Riley Moss as a cornerback, not a safety. And so that's a nice pick. Then they get after that they have no picks to the 6th round. They get J.L. Skinner, a safety, who's really good, but he tore a pec right before the combine, so he probably will not help the Broncos this year. He'll start training camp on the PUP list, And I think I'm not sure about the uh, mechanics of that, but he won't be available probably second month of the regular season. And then they got with that extra pick uh, in the flip for Adam Troutman, the veteran tight end. They got a center, Alex Forsyth from Oregon. So I think, given the situation that they didn't have a first or second round, they did pretty good. They got good players who are going to help on special teams, who are going to be depth at their position, and maybe they'll play about halfway through the year.
Any one of those players, maybe is it Drew Sanders, who ends up playing the most out of that crop of rookies in year one?
Yeah, Sanders, I think is. They also got Jonas Griffith at inside linebacker. I don't know if they've completely given up on him, but Drew Sanders, I think, has a chance to play some, not right away. He'll definitely be a core special teamer. Mims, I think, has a chance to be a punt returner right away, and mix in Riley Moss. Um, it's hard to say without seeing them in pads and training camp. 2 weeks in a training camp. Uh, ask me that question again.
Fair deal. I agree with that.
Yeah.
All right. So I guess when it comes to the draft itself, how much of a role did Sean Payton himself have in it, or is this still George Payton's show?
Well, I think George Payton and his staff did all the legwork. And as far as interviews, they Sean Payton did join him for interviews in Indy at the combine. But I think the scouts and the analytics and all the reports were written up by George Payton's staff. Then they had discussions with Sean Payton. Sean Payton said, "I need this kind of tight end." So they gave him cut up film of these certain tight ends, and then as the draft fell, on draft days when it came time to making the picks, I think Sean Payton was probably, it was 50-50 with George. And Sean Payton knows what he wants. He's the guy that wants certain players for his team. He communicates that to George. George says, "Look at this guy," and Sean says, "I like this guy." And so quite a bit, I would say at least 50-50, if not 55-45, although the totality of the work was probably 75% George.
Interesting. Well, I guess one thing to George Payton's credit is that the Broncos mid-round drafting has had some mixed results over the years, but it seems like they've gotten maybe a little better there of late. I think about Javonte Williams, Baron Browning, Draymond Jones, Dalton Risner, some pretty good impact players in that second and third round area over the last couple of years, right, Mike?
Yeah, Draymond was prior in the John Elway. I'm not sure if he was in the 18th draft or 19th draft. Um, but so he was a third round. But since George in the middle rounds, Quinn Miners was a starter in the third round at the end of the third. You said Baron Browning, he was the end of the third. I'm trying to think who else he had in the fourth or fifth there.
Javonte? Well, Javonte was second, but
Javonte was second. Jonathan Cooper was a seventh rounder. He was a nice contributor right off the bat in 2020. And then last year again, they didn't have the first or second round. They went a big one that they got last year was Damari Mathis in the fourth round. He wound up being an 11-game starter for them at cornerback. He was probably their best pick. So you're right. The third and fourth round have been good in the middle rounds, the Broncos, which they have to be because they didn't have first or second rounds the last 2 years.
Yeah, got to figure it out. I guess one final thing before we let you go here, Mike, is, of course, the other news aside from the draft was the fact that the Broncos picked up the fifth-year option on Jerry Jeudy. Reported this back on Monday. I suppose this was expected. Will there be efforts to re-sign him to a longer-term deal before training camp?
I don't think so. as far as a longer term deal. It was expected, though. The way he finished up in the last 6 games, 37 catches, 523 yards. If you kind of multiply that out over a 17-game season, that's 105 catches and roughly 1,400 yards. So that's big time production. That's what they expected. That's the first significant stretch for Jeudy since he's been the number 15 overall pick in the 2020 draft that he met expectations. Remember that draft, 8 receivers went in the top 34 picks. And Justin Jefferson, going number 22 to the Vikings, far and away was the best. CeeDee Lamb of the Cowboys, who went number 17, I think, again behind Jeudy. He's been second best, and now Jeudy's starting to play like he belongs also. So, yeah, it's $13 million, a little less than that, but which is a lot. But the free agent receivers now are getting more than $20 million a year. So not bad for a 1-year deal. I don't think he'll get a contract because he hasn't done it long enough. He's had that 6-game stretch. Now he has to have a 16, 17-game stretch. And then he'll get the multi-year deal. I think you'd probably look at the middle of the season before they entertain a long-term deal for Jeudy.
Fair enough. All right. Well, Jerry Jeudy coming back and the Broncos adding 5 new players in the draft. We've always got Mike Klis, our 90s Broncos insider. Mike, thanks so much for taking the time to join us today.
You got it, Chris. Thanks a lot.